Okay, I did my presentation on Chinese porcelain. So the history of Chinese porcelain is, it was created in Jing-Dajian, China. China supplied porcelain to the emperors of China for over 500 years, and it was the main supplier to the rest of the Chinese industries. Starting around 1402, Chinese emperors would order porcelain to be used at the court and state rituals. It was given as gifts, and it was used for the decoration of palaces. During the prime of porcelain production in Jing-Dajian, over 10,000 specialists or artists were at work to produce pieces of art. So local rock and clay provided the majority of the makeup for the clear, glossy porcelain. Jewel-like colors were added to the outer layer of the porcelain to give the pieces color and vibrancy. In the picture, you can see that vibrancy was added to these plates to give it color. So for the production of porcelain and how it was made. So porcelain is made from China stone, which are also known as white bricks, and kaolin. These were both extracted by explosives or hand power. Today they're mostly extracted by explosives, but in the past they were extracted by hand power and more of a manual labor. After that, they were crushed by pistols into a fine powder. The powder is mixed with water to form a clay. The clay dried into the correct consistency, and then it was used by potters to create vessels or differing art pieces depending on what they wanted to make. The pieces were thrown on wheels individually. So first the clay was centered and walls were thrown to the desired size. If the piece was very large, it was made by multiple people on a much larger scale wheel. These pieces were much harder to make as the clay was much more difficult to center. The pictures show images of the China stone and the kaolin. Here is a visual of the steps that are taken when creating a porcelain piece. From throwing it on the wheel in the top left, to trimming a foot, to drawing a design on the side, to finished products drying out. In China, most pieces are decorated with designs painted on the clay which represent Hindu or Chinese ideas during the time period. Emperors from this time would request pieces with 5-clawed dragons, images of cranes which represented immortality, certain fruits, certain animals or religious symbols, and many other things. The pieces were glazed in many different ways. Some of these ways included paintings, drawing, dipping into the glaze, and blowing glaze, which was used for much larger pieces. So the pictures on this page are of the 5-clawed dragon and the crane. These are examples of the different types of glazing techniques. So the top left shows painting or drawing. The bottom left shows dipping, which took the least abilities to do. You just dipped the whole piece into the glaze and it would all be the same color. The right shows the blowing technique, which was used on much bigger vessels. So the painting and drawing was more detailed. It could be used for you could use many different colors on it as well. So after being glazed, artwork has to be fired in a kiln. A kiln is a thick container made of coarse clay bricks called sagres that can go up to extremely high temperatures, around 1250 degrees. These bricks are unique because they can go without cracking or changing shape when getting to these extremely high temperatures. The kiln is kept hot by burning wood or modern oil burning methods. Today's kilns are more oil burning methods, but the past kilns used wood burning methods. After being fired and cooled, the porcelain pieces are ready to be used or displayed as art pieces in today's or the past world. Porcelain pieces during the time period contained a lot of symbolism. The floral design on many pieces was a representation of beauty, and more specifically, the flowers had specific representations. So the peaches on these pieces represented fertility. The lotus flower is associated with Buddhism and is a symbol of feminine beauty. The chrysanthemums were associated with longevity and wealth because the name sounds similar to the word Ju, meaning long enduring. It's a Chinese word. And the hibiscus flower represents wealth and glory. The hibiscus flower is very common in the Chinese porcelain pieces. In my opinion, these pieces of art have many different purposes, from everyday utility to being displayed in high social standing places like a museum or a palace that is seen by hundreds or thousands of people on a high social standing. The utility pieces are used in everyday households like bowls, plates, silverware, anything like that can be used in an everyday household that can be made from porcelain. So when talking about the degree of skill for the pieces, it varies from piece to piece depending on the amount of design or color that's used in the piece. So a single colored vessel does not take as much technical skill as an intricately designed floral vase or plate. As you see in these pictures below, they have a lot of intricately designed floral patterns and colors that are used in them. They probably took days or weeks for the artist to make, as each little design had to be drawn or carved into the piece, and the glaze had to be painted on by each color. Change had to be made. So these take a lot of technical skill when being compared to just a single cup or vase that was dipped in a single colored glaze. When talking about the artists of these porcelain vessels and vases, there is no single artist for each piece. Every piece is made by a different artist. As I said earlier, there's tens and thousands of skilled makers of these pieces. In Jingdezhong, they were producing the pieces at an extremely high rate during the era, so they were made by people who could produce them. They had the same technique when making them, but many different people made the pieces. This is very different when looking at other pieces of artwork from different eras. Usually there's one artist who creates different pieces that are very famous, but for these porcelain pieces, it was more of the technique that was famous and the design that became famous, such as the symbolism and the colors that became well known. These are my resources, and my name's Eliza Denmeade. Thank you.